Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. Now, some of you might remember that a couple of months ago, might even be 3 or 4 months ago, I repotted a Cattleya. It was a very large, unruly Cattleya with most of the roots dead, most of them out of the pot. And I made a few mistakes with it. I certainly repotted it at the wrong time, but I'm happy to say it came back and it's growing strongly now. And what I want to do today is repot a Cattleya at the right time when it has some new growths and it has some new roots. And I want to give you some little interesting tidbits of information about it that I found out about the history of a Cattleya, and also talk about some of its cultural requirements in terms of what I've learned and what I consider at this particular moment to be the important pieces of information that I need to remember when I'm repotting Cattleyas, and maybe you do too. So let's jump into it. And we're in. So this is the Cattleya in question. This was a no ID orange Cattleya that I bought, I think it was November time. I'll just have a look at the label. Cattleya hybrid, purchased 5th of the 11th, bonfire night, yeah, 5th of the 11th 2019. And this particular one was very, very fragrant, really bright orange with a darker orange centre. And I'll see if I can find some footage and share with you some footage from when it was in its prime. And it has bloomed for me since. It bloomed on this pseudo bulb, but only one of the buds went through to blooming. The other one blasted, unfortunately, and I don't know why Cattleyas do that. I have got another one, another no ID one that's done exactly the same. I'll just pop that one in front so you can see it. I've never had this one bloom for me yet. I've had it a couple of years and the bud there blasted, so I've no idea what it looks like. Maybe because it's still quite a small one. Well, that's another story. So why do I want to repot this one? Well, there's no particular reason that it has to be repotted. At the moment, if you look down inside there, it's got new roots starting to go around the side of the pot. I expect eventually those will come over the edge, but they're not over the edge yet. There's a new growth down there, some new roots there on this side. Now that came to me like that, and those little green shoots there appear like something's going to happen, and then they just kind of stopped and stalled, but there's a big new growth there. So we've got growth coming on either side of this rhizome. So I was thinking of cutting off some of the back bulbs to try and make a bit more room, but really I can't do it on that side, can't do it on that side. Possibility we've got two little, I mean, they're definitely not going to bloom. There's no sheaths there. It's just vegetative growth. It might be worth me cutting those off. I don't know whether it is or not, because they're not really taking up that much room. Obviously, they're going to be feeding the plant. I can't really think of any possible reason why I should take those off. If they're going to give me a lot of room, then yeah. But no, I think at the moment anyway, my decision is going to be I'm going to keep them. So you would normally repot them, obviously, if they're going over the side, if it's too big. But my main reasons are, I've no idea how long they've been in here. The seller that I got it from, although they're a really good seller, I think they don't grow them, the cells, I don't think, because they all tend to be in different pots and different conditions. So I think they probably buy them in from somewhere. So I don't know what's going on inside there. I also find it very difficult to know when to water when I can't see what's going on with the roots. I use the old label trick where I stick the label down and then put it to my lips to feel if it's wet, but I would rather actually see what's going on. The other one that you saw is actually in a transparent pot, so I can see exactly what's going on with those roots, and I know that I'm not going to over wet it, because that's definitely been a theme running through my orchid growing experience so far, which isn't that great if I'm honest. So what I want to do here, I want to repot this, have a look at the roots, and see if I can tell you some interesting bits of information about it as we are doing it. So the first thing to mention before I get on to having a look at those roots, is that I'm not sure whether I'm actually pronouncing it correctly. I know pronunciation's different throughout the world, throughout countries, wherever you are, but this plant, as far as I can see, should be a Cattleya as opposed to a Cattleyas. Now, why do I say that? Well, the guy who it's named after is a man called William Cattley. Now, he was an Englishman, and usually anything ending in ley is pronounced lee as opposed to lay. So you would expect it to be Cattleya. It's a strange story actually as to why he is the guy who it's named after, because he didn't even discover the plant. He actually received a shipment, or he came by his particular Cattleya from a guy who sent a shipment to Glasgow Botanic Gardens back in 1817. Glasgow Botanic Gardens up in Scotland, and his name was William Swainson. He was a horticulturalist, and he just sent a big load of different plants from like South America area, and this was one of them. And William Cattley came upon this shipment, and he was the one who grew. Apparently, wasn't looking very healthy, as it wouldn't be if it came over from South America. I mean, obviously, it would have come on a ship. It probably would have taken many months to get here, and certainly not in tropical conditions to get all the way up to Scotland. But he nursed it back to health, and it bloomed for him, and he actually employed a guy, which I can't remember the name of, who was like an illustrator, and it was the illustrator who named this particular species of plant after William Cattley once he died. So I don't know, maybe it should be a Swainsonea, or a Swainssonia maybe. Seeing as William Swainson was the guy who actually introduced it to the Western world. There is another school of thought who would say that really it wasn't discovered by William Swainson. I guess it would have been discovered by the indigenous peoples of South America, so maybe they should be the ones to name it. Well, it's interesting to look into this, what's in a name. To think that this plant, a tropical plant which comes from South America, is actually named after someone who probably never went there, or hardly ever went there, and didn't even know or wasn't aware that it was named after him until he died. Strange, very, very peculiar how these things happen. I suppose it was all to do with the empire at the time. So anyway, whatever you want to call it, Cattleyas. It is what it is. I'll probably swap and change, as I tend to do with these things. So yeah, that's a little bit of the history on the naming. So I've said why I'm going to repot it. It's not absolutely necessary. I could keep it a bit longer. I actually left it longer than I would normally because this looked like this sheath was going to bloom. I let that bloom. We've got a nice new growth. We've got the roots. I think it's time to have a look to see what's going on inside there. So let's have a look and see what's going on. I'm pretty confident it's going to be okay. Not like my how to repot a Cattleya video, which I will link to, by the way, so you can see where I'm coming from. That was my first experience, and I'll also link to the follow-up that I did from that. I think it was something called What I Learned from My Subscribers About Cattleyas or something along those lines. I'll put a card up so you can see. Right, so straight away I can say I've done pretty well with making sure that I've not overwatered it. Well, it does still look inside quite damp. The weather over here at the moment is very, very warm. It's really nice at the moment in the UK. No sign of rain. You can see the roots are looking fine there. But I want... That's not going to come off without snapping it. What I want to do is could possibly be some... Yeah, there are some dead ones which I might as well get rid of. And as usual, there is... I don't know if you can see up there. There is a sphagnum moss plug right in the centre, as there usually is, and I would like to try and get to the bottom of that and give it a good boost. It's completely hollow actually in the middle. Yeah, it does needs a repot. I think it's probably been in there most of its life anyway. It's not really growing in much. There's not a lot of media in there. So let's have a look. Great big fleshy roots. I don't know about you lot, but anybody who does this, I really love this particular job. I love getting my hands in there, and there's something satisfying about unpotting an orchid, and especially when it's got roots. There will be some cutting going on here because these are not all alive. Some of these are dead, especially the ones near the bottom, and there's the pesky plug in the middle. So the reason why we do this, so I have learned, is that orchids are not that thrilled about acidic media, and the longer the media and the roots are in the same pot, the more likely it is that the media has gone acidic, especially if it's sphagnum. That goes acidic pretty quickly. So I reckon this is probably only its second pot. First one being the little plug that it was in, and the second one being that tiny bit of bark. So all that can come out. I mean, the fact that it bloomed shows you that it's not hugely bothered about the fact that it wasn't in so much media, which was something else that I came across in my research on Cattleyas. I got my information from, I got some from the American Orchid Society. There are various other orchid websites that pop up when you search for these things. I've got some from the North of England Orchid Society. I got some from Wikipedia, I have to say, but it's not the case that I took one source and one source only. I got it from several sources and I mixed and matched, and where most people, I've just brought that off, although it's not doing anything anyway, where most people agree with each other, that's where I took the information as, well, that must be true. And from my own discussion on these kind of things, that doesn't mean it is, and that doesn't mean my opinion's not going to change, because, you know, just because lots of people said it's true doesn't mean it is. But in the absence of any other verifiable source, that's all you can do, isn't it? And try it yourself. Great big hole. Anybody who's used to temperate plants, so anybody in the UK like me, this is a very unnatural thing to do. We're just not used to doing this. What we're used to doing is protecting a root ball. You know, you get a root ball filled with roots. What you don't want to do is disturb that root ball in temperate plants. It's the last thing you want to do. But orchids are different. Orchids have pseudobulbs, and even if, as I've discovered recently, even if you don't have one viable root on an orchid, especially a Cattleya, do not write it off. Get the temperature right, and the light, and the conditions, the air movement and the humidity, and that will produce roots and growths, usually at the same time. The way I try to think of it, well, that's not good, is it? Where does that come from? Oh, some growth. No! Jeff, you bloody idiot. Well, I'm lost for words. Oh well. No use crying over spilt milk. It's gone. Excuse me while I utter a few expletives. Well, that's completely thrown me. No idea what I was talking about. Yeah, so anyway, that one will have to come instead now, won't it? The thing is, it's not going to flower for 12 months anyway, so let's just be philosophical. So yeah, anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, if you use to temperate plants, you protect the root ball and you don't go digging into the root ball and pulling all the roots out and checking to see which is alive and which is dead, etc. There are a surprisingly lot of dead roots here actually, and I always think that they kind of breathe a sigh of relief if you chop them all off. Don't know whether that's true or not, but they do seem to respond better. See all these with this stringy bits, they're all dead, and really the only live ones are the ones at the top here. So it's time to get cutting. So I'll just stick that back on with a bit of glue. So I'm going to spray it with some isopropyl alcohol just to make sure there's no bugs on my snipper things here. So what we're going to be left with at the end of this is not a great deal to anchor the plant with. And that's another thing with orchids, they seem to prefer to be anchored. Well, I mean, I guess that's not really it's not really something that we wouldn't expect. You know, plants like to be anchored, don't they? Of course they do. That's why, partly why they have roots for anchorage. Otherwise they'd be like triffids wandering around the planet. So, oh, it's not going well. Right, let me see, where are we up to? You have these days, don't you? Everything goes wrong. But are we downhearted? No. Well, a little bit. So I think I'll speed this bit up and then you don't have to listen to me waffling about nothing. 3, 2, 1, go. Right, okay, so I think we have done the best we can with this. You can see the new green growths. You can see the new growth that's coming there. You can see the one that I've just destroyed. Now whether that will come or not, I doubt it. It'll probably die off, but we'll see anyway. I think most of these are okay, although I'm not going to start pulling them. There's going to be, I've got rid of the ones that are definitely dead, the ones that I can see the stringy bits. They're mostly up the centre really, and I know I could keep chipping at it forevermore. It was the old bark I wanted to get rid of more than anything, and as he says that, he starts chipping away again. But I want to give some kind of anchorage, and I will put like a wire stake up the middle to try and make sure that it stays absolutely sturdy, because if they are sturdy they do seem to root much quicker than if they're wobbling about, which kind of makes sense really, doesn't it? So as I hold this, the Cattleyas are known as the Queen of Orchids. They were certainly one of the very first in the UK in Victorian times. I have to say, I think they've fallen out of favour in the UK. A lot of these plants were grown in Victorian Britain and people just don't seem to grow them anymore. I'd never even heard of them up until a couple of years ago. And to actually learn how to grow these things has been a real joy. It's been fantastic to see something. I think it's just something different, isn't it? I suppose if you're used to growing orchids and they grow naturally where you live, and it's not, you know, you've got all the conditions there naturally, then it's not a challenge, but it's certainly a challenge in the north of the UK to grow them. But I think they are one of the easier ones out of all the different orchid types. So yeah, Queen of the Orchids. I don't know if that's still true, but for me maybe. So let's go through some of its conditions before I repot this and show you what I'm going to do. So light, obviously very high light, high intensity light. Here in the UK, I would say they can probably tolerate full sun, although I wouldn't leave them in full sun in midsummer. I'd say probably, I don't know, October to kind of April time, you might allow them to get some full sun in a window, maybe behind some netted curtains. I don't know, I'm kind of backtracking on that a little bit really, but they certainly get more of our full sun than they would if they were in the tropics. And anything where you're behind glass, if you're in the tropics, is a big no-no. You want some shade on, but if you live here, then you want to try and get it as much light as it can if you live in the UK. So they are a high light plant, and they like lots of air movement, but only really if they've got high humidity. They will, if you've got air movement on them and it's low humidity, then they will dry out very, very quickly, and you're going to be doing a lot of watering. So your best conditions are high humidity and lots of air movement, which isn't an easy thing to do in the UK, to be honest. The air movement and inside in a conservatory is going to be difficult. Well, yes, you can get some fans, but how do you get the humidity in there? Well, you're going to have to build it up somehow. I know people talk about putting it on a gravel tray, but honestly, here in the greenhouse, I've got water dripping all over the place, and it does not improve the humidity unless I have the humidifier on. Oh, that's what I've even got a full tray full of water there, and it makes not one jot of difference to the humidity sensors. They're not picking it up. So really, to me, the only way to do it is to either get a hydrofogger or one of those cheaper ones that pump out water vapor. That pump out water vapor, and that's really the best way to increase the humidity. Temperatures, you really want to keep it above 15 degrees Celsius, that is. Over night time, you don't want it to go below there. During the day, they can stand it really up to about 29-30 degrees, so long as they've got that air movement and that humidity. They're a very tough plant, very tough leaves. If the leaves start to go yellow, you're probably giving them too much sun. I have got an example of one here. And you can see it's beginning to go, I'm not sure I've got that in camera because I can't see it because of the sun. It's beginning to go a bit yellow in the leaves. This isn't actually a Cattleya, but it's showing the same kind of thing. And the leaves are yellowing because it's been in the sun a little bit too much. So I've moved that one a little bit more shaded. But this one, at the moment, it's in a good spot. The leaves are not too yellow, not too green. Too green could show that it's too shady. Too much vegetative growth with empty sheaths or blind sheaths, as they say, would show or could show that you're giving it not enough light. Humidity, 40 to 70% humidity is the recommended dosage of humidity. Watering, well, you water it when it's dry. They do like to get dry. You don't want to have lots and lots of moisture around those roots for a length of time, and this is why they're very easy to overpot. I did exactly that with this one. This is another no ID Cattleya, and I had it in a very, very, well, not a very large pot, but a much larger pot than this, probably something more akin to that size. And because I planted it like I would a temperate plant, I was giving it space for the roots to grow. But what you find is, because they don't like to be wet all the time, the outer casing, if you like, the outer section of media stays wet, doesn't dry, and that's how you rot your roots. And this ended up with no roots whatsoever until I got wise to it, put it in a small pot. It's not that they like to be in a small pot, it's just what they don't like is that wet staying around the roots. So by putting it in a small pot, you're not giving it chance to get lots of wet around the roots. It's going to be nice and stable. I've got a wire stake thing here holding it in place, and that was the only thing that worked with that. And once this is bloomed, I will then repot that one and give it a little bit more room. So you need to avoid overpotting. Media is one of these. With media, it's anything that works for you. I've seen them in bark, coconut husks, gravel, lava rock, river rock, sphagnum moss, leca, just about everything. For me, in my environment, I need something that is very, very well drained, very open, airy, and is not going to hold on to the moisture, because that's what happens in my environment. Most of the orchids that I ever have trouble with, it's because the roots are rotting because they are too wet. And that is, you know, anybody who's growing things in the UK like that, growing orchids in the UK, will be familiar with that. We have a lot of humidity. We have a lot of non-sunny days, dark, dreary, wet, miserable. Why the heck I live here, I have no idea. But I'm stuck here for now anyway. So what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to put it in some bark, pretty much like what it was in anyway. I did read on one site, and I kind of agree, that put a little bit of perlite in there. Perlite doesn't seem to harm anything, and it does give you a little bit of moisture to hold on to. So I'm going to put a little bit of perlite in there as well. But whatever you do, you know, it will be dependent on your conditions. Fertilization, similar story with most orchids. Overfeeding can result in blind sheaths. Err on the side of too little. Flush regularly. They don't like a build-up of salts. And the recommendation was quarter to half strength, and feed only in the growing season. So I'm not going to give an absolute figure for how much you should feed it or what you should feed it. I just feed it the same orchid feed that I put for everything else. It's like a general purpose orchid feed, and every so many weeks, 3-4 weeks, I put a little bit of extra magnesium in and calcium in, and some weeks I'll put a little bit extra calcium as opposed to the magnesium. So I can use CalMag, which gives you a specific amount of calcium and magnesium, and for the other weeks I will just add the calcium, so they get a bit extra calcium. I don't know if that's the absolute thing to do, but it's what lots of people seem to agree is the thing to do. So who am I to argue? I'll go along with it, and I'll experiment myself and see what's what, whether they seem to improve or not. It's very difficult, really, isn't it? Because how do you know if that's what's happened? The way I look at it is they're getting some feed. I try to be more cautious and not overfeed them, because I really don't think feeding is the magic sauce that decides on how well your orchids grow. I think the other factors are more important. Maybe it's them all taken together, I don't know. So I need to find a pot for that. I need to get the media together, and then I will come back to you. Okay, so we've got some fresh bark here with a handful of perlite. It's kind of falling to the bottom, but I'll have to try and mix it up a little bit. And I've just fashioned one of these wire clip things. Basically, I used to absolutely suck at these, but I'm getting slightly better as time's going on. So all I did for that one was I wrapped it around the outside of the pot, and then I just wrapped it round the upright there, and that is going to stand in there. I used to try and thread it through underneath, but there was nothing to kind of hold it in place. This one isn't perfect, but at least it's not, it's not going to move anywhere. It's pretty sturdy, so that should hopefully hold it into place. Well, I guess time will tell when I get it in there. And the idea is for this one, the whole thing holds itself down, so the media and the plant holds the wire down, which in turn holds the plant upright. That's the plan anyway. You know what they say about best laid plans. So put a little bit of this in, and then see if we can put the orchid in there. And it's exactly the same pot size as what it came out of. There's absolutely no need to go any bigger, seeing as I've cut most of the roots away anyway. There's another little dead bit there that I've just discovered, and now I've lost it again while picking up my snipper things. I think everything else feels fairly non-squishy. So I'm going to get that in there. Now, normally it would matter, wouldn't it, as to where the rhizome is going, and you would tend to put the newer rhizome away from the side of the pot to give it some room. Now, what I don't want is a big hole like we had before, so I've got to try and squish it in before I put it down. I don't want a huge hole of space underneath. Okay, so after some quite considerable poking and prodding and shoving, we seem to have our repotted Cattleya. You can see that wire has actually moved up, which is not what I wanted, but it's too late now. I'm not going to start all over again. The key for me is stability. It needs to be stable within the pot. Now, the whole thing isn't stable because of the way these leaves are kind of twisting and turning, so the whole thing is always going to be a bit wobbly as long as it's in a small pot, unless I start cutting some of these back bulbs off. Now, that might be something that I do. There are a couple with really dodgy leaves, like twisting and turning, they keep catching on things, so I might do that, and it might just kind of stabilize it up a little bit. I think that might be something worth doing. I'm kind of talking myself into that. Other things that went wrong was the phone that I'm filming on overheated. That's never happened before in my entire filming career. It's showing in the sun at the moment. I've got the vents open in the greenhouse, and the sun is shining on the iPhone. So I've never actually had a message from a phone before saying I'm shutting down because I'm overheating. So that is actually a thing. Did you know? So what I did was I went and stuck it in the freezer for 5 minutes. That seemed to do the trick. So yeah, anyway, it is stable in the pot. The fact that the roots aren't in contact with all the media, that's not what I'm after. Like I said, with temperate plants, the temperate plants get a lot from the roots. Lots of the nutrients, as well as the stability, comes from them absorbing things from the surrounding media. Not so with orchids. Cattleyas can grow in pretty much anything. You know, if it can grow in a pile of stones, then it can grow in bark, perlite, moss, whatever it is, providing that you're not going to let those roots stay soggy and wet. So I just need it to be stable in the pot. I know it's not moving around within that pot now. I know it's not going to end up with a load of wet around it. So I'm happy with that. Like I say, I might cut these two kind of outlier leaves off, and those pseudo, but I might just cut the leaves off actually at the top and leave the pseudo bulb, and at least then it might be a little bit more stable and not keep falling over. So that's it for today. That's my Cattleya repot and my no ID Cattleya. I'm certainly not the font of all knowledge on Cattleyas, as you well know, so if anybody has any tips for me, then I would love to hear from you. Stick your answers and your tips and your questions in the comments as usual, and for now I will see you on the next one. Bye.